So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. That's the essence of this morning's passage, what it's seeking to teach us. With that in mind, would you stand with me this morning and turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 16. For this morning's reading, I'll be reading verses 1 through 12. Verses 1 through 12 in Exodus chapter 16. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily." So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, "At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, 'Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." May the Lord add his blessing this morning to the reading of his word. You may be seated. I want to read again that portion of the song that I just read before the sermon. "So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay." We have, Becky and I, a bit of a somewhat common occurrence in our household that looks a little bit like this. Becky will misplace her phone, lose her phone, and she'll need to look up something on the internet, and so she'll ask me for my phone. I'll give her my phone. She opens up my internet, and she will see several tabs that have to do with health and illness questions for a 40-year-old. And she'll say, "Ben, what are all these tabs open for all these different health questions? You're such a hypochondriac, you know." And my response is, look, I am fine if I have problems. I'm fine with that, as long as I know that those problems are normal problems. That's all I want to know. That's the essence of the question. I don't mind feeling this way if I have to feel this way. I just want to know if feeling this way is normal. That's all. That's the point. And I think that line of thinking is a very normal way of thinking. Maybe not in regard to how it surfaces in my life, in regard to health questions. But I think something that we frequently want to know about anything and everything is this normal? In some way, shape, or form. And what I think is a very important role of a mother and a father when they're raising their children is to be a source of normality for their kids. To not pretend to live life a certain way that's not normal. It's not helpful for your kids. When they come to you with a problem that they're experiencing at school or in their mind or in their heart, that you don't look at them as though they were a freak. When they sin, you don't respond to them as though that's abnormal. See, the Bible is an incredibly good counselor for us, a sounding board for us, and it frequently, you'll find, fields the question of what is normal. It answers that question. For instance, the Bible even normalizes the abnormality. It's kind of an oxymoron. It normalizes the abnormality of temptation. When the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you except what is what? Common to man. So whatever anybody is going in to a counselor's office for, or a pastor's office for, or confiding in a friend, and they sort of look both ways before they say it, or as they're walking into the counselor's office, they kind of like park in an off parking lot and sort of quickly go in because they don't want anybody to know. What they're going in for, however freakish that might seem to them, the Bible calls common to man. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to everybody else in some way, fashion, or form. So you're not a freak. The Bible wants you to know that. In this life, temptation is common. It's common. And when you ask, well, what about this? Okay, I'm glad the Bible put this in. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common. So temptation is common, and yes, every kind of temptation is common. There's no, oh, but this goes in that realm. No. It's all common in some way, shape, or form. So the Bible wants you to know that. It also wants you to know that God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability or the ability He supplies, but with the temptation, He will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. See, this verse alone does battle on both the humble and the prideful. See, because there's times that people tell me, well, no one can understand what I'm going through. Wrong. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common. Don't put yourself outside of the realm of humanity so that you can be the exception to the rule. It's not true. Other people have gone through exactly what you're going through in one way, shape, or another. So don't think you're special to the point of enabling sin, because everyone's dealt with some of this stuff just the way you are. That's the prideful, but what about the humble? The humble may look at themselves as being lost in the woods on a path that no one has ever traveled before, beyond God's reach. And Paul says, no. You may be in the woods, you may feel distant from everybody, even God, but look down and you'll find that it's a worn path. You're not the first one on this path. Other people have traversed this very same ground, and God has met them there just like He'll meet you. Don't think you're outside of God's reach. So, In this passage, we find that God's telling us what's normal, and He's saying temptation is normal. Yes, every kind is normal. It's common. So asking the question, what is normal, is a question that's fielded by God with our temptations. We ask it about our marriages. We ask it about our intimate life within marriage. We ask it about our parenting. We ask it about our age, or at least I do, and some of you as well, I trust. We ask it about how our kids are doing, how they're developing, what they're struggling with. Is this abnormal? Is this normal? At this age, is this normal? I remember a parent telling me that when their son reached puberty, he said to his mom, I just feel like crying. I don't know what's going on. She said, that's okay. Go to your room and cry. It's okay. That's helpful. It's helpful. What? You feel like crying? What's wrong? That's not helpful. And that's what people, no, it's not funny because people do that. People treat their kids that way. When their kids sin, people look at them with a face that communicates the words, even though they don't have to say the words. That's damaging. We even want to know what's normal with our cooking. I won't mention the name because then he'll have to give them to everyone in the church, but someone recently graciously blessed me with morel mushrooms. He refuses to tell me his hiding spot, where he finds them, and that sort of thing, of course. But it was the first, I'm not a cook, and not even close to a cook, but I tried cooking them. And something happened weird while I was cooking them, and then I talked to someone else who cooked them, and they said, yeah, when that happens, you're supposed to do this. And I was like, that's so helpful, because I was concerned whether what I saw was normal. Even in our cooking, we want to know what's normal. In our gardening, how our car's performing. How many times Greg's probably been asked, is this normal? I remember working on the attic, and I reached the point where the angled ceiling met the dormer in the attic, and I was alone at that point working, and I had to figure out this angle where the two boards met, and it was like 4 angles involved, or more if you counted the ends of the boards. And I'm holding the 2 boards up to try to just guess at the angle. And I literally almost broke down. I was so worn out. I was so tired. And they kept falling, and I couldn't keep them level. And I was just broken. And I called my friend Tony Laidlaw, and he finished his attic with drywall. And he said, Ben, and Tony's like the best I know at woodworking and construction. He says, man, I'll tell you what, I went to the best guy I knew when I got to that point. And he said, man, it's just a guessing game. Good luck. And that felt so good. It felt so good to hear that, because that's what I was feeling. I learned that what I was experiencing was normal. But perhaps there is no greater place that we want to know whether what we're experiencing is normal. When it comes to something that seemingly is so big, so looming, so threatening, that it threatens every single dimension of our lives. St. John of the Cross will call an experience such as this the dark night of the soul, when basically your greatest imagined fear becomes reality. Seemingly leaving no area of your life untouched. Life will now never be the same. That sort of moment. It's not just a car problem. It's not a cooking problem, a gardening problem. It is a forever life problem. Is this what the rest of my life is going to look like problem? I've read of missionaries that have left their home ground, went to foreign territories, and because they did that, because they followed God there, they're placed in a position that's outside of the normal medical relief and help. And as a result of that, both the location, Their child gets sick in that location, and they're outside of the realm of medical help, and as a result, their child dies. And they know that if I were back home, this wouldn't happen. It's that sort of moment where the husband looks at his wife, and it is a dark night of the soul moment. Is what we're doing right? Is what we're experiencing normal? Are we out of God's care? Are we on a path that no one has traversed? Are we on a path that God didn't even call us to? It's just everything is completely up in the air. It's an all-dimension sort of pain. No area is untouched. Some of you may remember Pastor's illustration of a man playing with his dog in the kitchen on a floor such as the stage here. And he's got a rag and the dog's jaws clenched on the rag. And it's fun for both the man and the dog as the man slides the dog across the smooth floor and the dog's not letting go. And in the dog's eyes is an admixture of playfulness and fierceness. And the man's having fun. And then all of a sudden the man decides to start slamming the dog into the counter and into the fridge, and into the stove. And at a certain point, the dog's eyes begin to change. This is no longer a playful game and exercise. This is, what are you doing? I don't like this at all, and I don't know how to stop it or when it will stop. I'm scared of you at this point. There's a sense in which God's children find themselves in a fog, a bewilderment of fog that has enclosed upon them, seemingly completely isolated from everyone's reach. No friends fully understand, and God Himself seems to be absent, or at least willing to allow it to continue. And so, I want to answer this morning a series of 3 questions, and this is our first. All the questions are asking, in essence, is it normal? And the first is bewildering pain in the life of a Christian normal? Answer, yes. Is bewildering pain in the life of a Christian normal? Yes. It's into this fog that the authors in the New Testament speak. Have you forgotten Hebrews 12? The exhortation that addresses you as sons? The author of Hebrews writes, "My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by Him. For the Lord disciplines the one He loves, and chastises every son whom He receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure." God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. All have participated. It's normal. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who have disciplined us and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them, but He disciplines us for our good, that we may share in His holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather healed. He's coming at the weak areas in your life, and He's making them strong. Apostle Peter writes, "Beloved, do not be surprised. Do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. It's normal. It's normal. Don't be shocked. Don't look bewildered when bewildering pain falls upon you. It's normal for His children to experiencing bewildering pain. In fact, the Bible would even say it's abnormal if you're not experiencing it. That's where you should be afraid. So, is it normal for God's children to experiencing bewildering pain? And the answer is yes. Now, the reason these authors are commenting on this and pain in the believer's life is because the New Testament understanding places us in redemptive history in a very similar place as Israel was in Exodus 16. See, there's the reason the Passover, the reason the Red Sea crossing, the reason the journey from Egypt to the Promised Land is such a significant deal in Exodus and throughout the rest of the Bible is because it is a physical and spiritual parallel to what we are experiencing right now in redemptive history. What do I mean by that? Here's the idea. What the New Testament authors understand is that as Israel left Egypt, so we left sin. As Israel left the captivity of Egypt, so we've left, as Christians, the captivity to sin. As Israel is headed to the Promised Land and are caught in the middle in this training ground in the wilderness, preparing them for the Promised Land, so we are caught in the middle between our captivity to sin and heaven. And this time, right now, in the interim between, is our training ground, our wilderness. That's what this is. This is where pain is weakness leaving the body. This is our moment. That's how they understand it. So we are very comparable to the people of Israel. Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 10, these things, in fact, were written for you. They're not written for them. It's not written for these people. It's written for us and the subsequent generations of these people. That's why these events are recorded. So, the mode that God has Israel in right now is the same mode He has us in. And I think of Rich Mullen's words here. What is God doing right now? Well, He's shaking us forward and shaking us free. That's what God's doing right now. He's getting us ready for what's to come, that we may share in His holiness. What is holiness? The best word I can use to describe holiness is free. It's separate from all else with God. That's holiness. What we find in this passage is that His people are not free, and neither are you, and neither am I. We're not free yet, but He's making us free. How does He do that? How does God make us free? That's the pressing question of the hour. How does He do it? We know that Him making us free is normal. We know that. And He does that through pain. But what does that pain look like? Let's just look at how it looks in Israel's life. Just think of what God has done in the book of Exodus thus far. Just think with me. God sends Moses to tell Israel He's going to make them free. They believe Him. Moses didn't think they would, but they did. They believe Him. It says they believe, they bowed, and they worshiped. It's this serene, beautiful moment. And then you know what happens next? Pharaoh says, absolutely not. I'm not going to let you go free. In fact, now you got to collect your own straw. Can you feel the sucker punch there? They're thinking, oh, hey, start packing the bags. So that's the first way God does it. But continue. He delivers them. He does it through the plagues. But then once He delivers them, He leads them on a counterintuitive route than they should have taken to the Promised Land. That's odd. That's odd. Listen, we go on the golf retreat, we argue about which way to take, I-80 or 74, and it blows up in the vans. No, 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 no. And that's a difference of like 5 minutes. They take an unexpected route, and then not only do they take an odd route, but once he gets them to where he says to go, he says, now turn around and walk back. They're like, what? He's got a plan with Pharaoh, but he doesn't tell them the plan. He just says, I got a plan. Interesting. He doesn't stop. This turnaround, this odd turnaround, ends up with Pharaoh now chasing them, and they've got no out, and God doesn't tell them how He's going to deliver them. Then He makes a way. He splits the water in two. And even this would have been a death-defying walk, would it not? I mean, you got walls of water as high as this ceiling to the floor. Like city walls on your right and your left. A pretty trembling moment to walk through the sea. And then He saves them through the Red Sea. But then He directs them on a 3-day march with no water and doesn't give them any word about it. Then He gives them water, and it's bitter water, so they can't. I mean, it's just every step of the way, what is God doing? He's questioning their understanding. They were leaning on their understanding, but now He's transferring them to His understanding, which doesn't make sense to them. My ways are not your ways. I'm not going to do it the way you think it should be done. Not going to do it that way. He questions their safety. He threatens, think of the basic elements of life that He threatens in just this first 4 weeks to 6 weeks of them being His children. He puts into question their air, basic necessities, they walk through the water. He questions their water, their food. What are these things? They are the very most basic elements. And here's what He's doing. He's taking the most basic elements of life, and he's listing them over here. You know, security, Egypt's chasing you. You're understanding the way you think, your brain. I'm questioning your own brain in the route I take you. I'm questioning your air, your oxygen as I walk you through this water. I'm questioning your water intake, your food intake. They all go on a list over here. And then I draw a line. And on the other side, I write God. That's it. The most basic elements of life and me. These are everything you trust in. Your brain, your air, your water, your food. Everything you rely on a daily basis to survive. That's right here. And then me. That is what He's doing to Israel. And that is what He intends and has done and is doing to do to us. To place us in situations far beyond our comprehension, our ability, our comfort level, our skills to maneuver or control, in order that He alone becomes our only hope, our only alternative, so that they can come to see that He is all they need. This is the idea of what God does. Is it normal to question everything you ever knew, everything you ever relied on as a Christian? Yes, it is. So if you find yourself right now in that territory, you are on familiar ground with the sons and daughters of God throughout redemptive history. Second question. Is it normal for God's children to fail at trusting Him during the test? Yes, it's normal. Is it normal for God's children to fail at trusting Him during the test? Yes. See, here's the idea. The test is to remove from the camouflage of your life the things upon which you rely. That's the point of the test. The test is to expose the things that you look to for your strength, satisfaction, joy, respect, all these sorts of things. Your clothing, as it were. And when that's removed, you're left naked with the things that you rely too heavily upon or upon at all. God wants all of that revealed. He wants all of your lifelines exposed, naked, so that He can deal with them and snip them off one at a time so that you can only solely rely on Him. That's the point. Tests are to make the dysfunctional reliances of our lives come to the fore. That's the idea. That's the point of the test. One of the kings in Israel falls through his lattice and he's injured, and so he sends his representatives to the equivalent of a witch doctor to find out what's going on with him. And he has his prophet meet the group of men going to say, is there not a God in Israel that you can inquire of your problem? Why are you relying on these lifelines that are not lifelines? So that's what a test is meant for, to reveal our lifelines. And of course, once our lifelines are revealed, we know that there's a reason we rely on them, and that gets dealt with. It's fascinating how God ups the ante with this test, moving from water to food. It's interesting, Nahum Sarna, commentator, points out that in 1524, in chapter 1524, when the water was a problem, the way that the narrator describes the situation is he says, the people grumbled against Moses. The people grumbled against Moses. But then in chapter 16, verse 2, it says, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So do you see whoa, this is bigger now. There are people doing it. Now it's the whole congregation. Now let me ask you a question. Very significant question this morning. Were Joshua and Caleb part of that congregation? We're told in Joshua 14, that when Caleb spied out the land, which is just in a little bit now, it's not an incredibly long time from here, when Joshua and Caleb and the 10 other spies spied out the land, Caleb recounts in Joshua 14 that he was 40 years old when he did that. He's essentially my age when he did that. Which means that Caleb at this point is right around that age. So, is Caleb part of this whole assembly of Israel? Absolutely. Does that mean that Caleb's failing right now? Very likely. The whole congregation of Israel is grumbling against Moses and Aaron. Joshua and Caleb are part of that whole congregation. They're part of it. So, what is the point? The point is to understand that you will fail the tests. What's the point of the test? I could even say this. What's a successful failing of a test? That's a good question. I just thought of it. What's a successful failure of one of God's tests? A successful failure is being able to look back and say, this is what I relied on instead of God at this moment. And God's like, good. You learned it. You learned. Your lifeline was exposed, whatever that was. Whatever you look to for your nourishment, your satisfaction, your sustenance, your worth, your hope, your joy. Now looking back, you see that was no joy, it was no hope, it didn't add to your worth, it didn't make you respectable. It wasn't any of those things. You've identified it. Success at failure. That's good. In fact, The Bible even goes as far as to say, if you say that you don't fail tests, you're a liar. 1 John 1:8, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. So, will you fail tests? Yes. How should you fail tests? By being able to look back and say, this is what I relied on instead of God at that moment. I've identified that. God's helped me identify that. But then, John also goes on and he says that no one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him. And he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. So there's this interesting balance of you will fail tests, but you won't keep failing them indefinitely. If you look at the track record of your life and you are a flat line of success in passing the tests of God, it's very likely that your heart as a child of God is a flat line. It's dead. It's not real. If there's no growth, if there's no upward trajectory, even if the upward trajectory, and I shouldn't say if, when the upward trajectory looks like this, do you see? You're failing, but you're growing. This is the idea. This is how it's meant to look. Listen, if you're taking notes, I strongly encourage you to write down Exodus 20:20. It's a very significant passage, especially for this Companion God series and narrative, because as God goes with us, He is consistently testing us, and Exodus 20:20 tells you the goal of the test. The point of the test is for us to reveal our lifelines, but the end goal of the test is this, Exodus 20:20. Listen, Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you." Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of the goal of the test, Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of Him may be before you, that you may not sin." And listen to that again. Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that in order that the fear of Him may be before you, that you may not sin. Now, friends, listen, it's like a satanic attack that the microphone went out at this point, because this is the point in my manuscript that I have stars all around it. It's fascinating. So please don't miss this. You know the testing of God is working in your life because of His numerous works of salvation. You fear of succumbing to sin. Let me unpack that sentence, okay? Here's the deal, and this isn't in Exodus 20, it's in Exodus 16. What does God say to Israel as they start failing the test and grumbling because they lack food? He says it twice in the reading this morning. That is this: God is going to reveal His glory to you. Okay? When will the glory show up? Well, it shows up in two places. It shows up in the morning when they wake up for the first time and they see a glaze over the ground and it is manna. That's when they see the glory, and then they see the glory of God in the cloud. Now here's the important thing. Whenever you are tested by God and all looks as though it's lost, you will see His glory in that. You will see His glory show up. God would have given them manna whether they grumbled or not. The manna was going to be there. Had they spent the whole night in prayer, somber, soulful prayer, the glory would have shown up. It was going to be there no matter what. God's going to take care of his children. So the glory is always going to be there. But here's the deal. Testing is always followed by glory. Testing is always followed by glory. The glory will always show up. We see it in 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. As God is faithful, he will always provide a way out for you so that you may be able to endure it. That way out is his glory. Every temptation is followed by glory. Now, what does glory look like? Unfortunately, so much of the glory of God that we see comes to us after we've already succumbed to grumbling, to sin, to giving in to temptation. So much of our Christian lives, we see God's glory after we failed the test. But I want to describe that glory, and I want to see if it sounds familiar to you, okay? Best definition I've ever seen, Douglas Stewart describes the glory of God this way. I just love this definition. God's glory is his impressiveness, awesomeness, the sense of his divine greatness, the sense of his divine greatness that may be difficult to describe in words, but that is often felt in terms of fear, awe, amazement, and the sense that one is not in the presence of anything that is merely worldly, but someone who is truly in the essence of superiority and eternal authority, worthy of worship and adoration, and dangerous to oppose. While God cannot be seen, he often lets his glory be sensed. Friends, just imagine what it was like for the disciples to see Jesus multiply the loaves and the fish, when he put upon them the task of feeding the people. I mean, they felt the weight of that job. It's an incredible weight to feed the people. And they come to him and they say, look, all we have is this. And Jesus says, he prays, blesses it, starts handing out. All these people are fed. Just imagine the aura of the presence of the glory of God, seeing that happen. And friends, I can tell you, and sometimes they come out in just very private moments of counseling people where God has given me just small glimpses, but vast in my estimation, of his glory. Where he ministered to me in my sin. That the Spirit ministered to me in a way that was unmistakably from him. I look back on those moments, and those moments of failure and exposure to his glory and him fixing the situation have now placed me in a place that when I'm tempted in similar areas, I look back on those salvific, saving, glory moments of God, and I say, I never want to sin again because I've seen his salvation work in this event. So many events in my life that have threatened, they've been that dark night of the soul events that seem to threaten everything I know. Push me into this realm where God is. And I'll tell you this, I'm going quicker to the realm where God is than I am lingering on my own devices. There are still times that I linger on my own devices to fix a situation, whatever the case is, but more often I'm going with ease to his place because I know he's going to do it. He's going to fix it. Just imagine the amount of times that Jesus was faced with life-threatening moments, whether it was no one respecting him, even his own family calling him a madman. His greatest supporter, John the Baptist, getting his head chopped off. The most religious elite not accepting him as Messiah. All of these things did not threaten Jesus' reliance on his Father, going into the wilderness, facing hunger, facing a quicker way to glory that Satan presented to him. All of these things, Jesus trusted the resources of his Father more than his own human resources, and God delivered every time. So that when Jesus was in the tomb and he opened his eyes and he started breathing again, I believe a smile likely broke out across his face because it was simply another moment of deliverance. Every time Jesus was tested, he had no other lifelines than his Father. He looked to his Father. Even when they're hurling insults at him that weren't true, he could have defended them, but he kept his mouth silent and entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He didn't care about reputation. He cared about his Father. Reputation with him was good enough. This is Jesus. This is who he is. He never failed, but Caleb did. Caleb failed the test. But before I go to the third question, I want to ask you this. Have you experienced God's glory? Have you looked back at moments of your life where when everything you knew was threatened and you likely failed? Then did you see God put all of Humpty Dumpty back together again in your life? And you said, man, I should not have responded the way I did. Whether that was losing my temper, whether that was losing my hair, whether that was losing my peace, whether that was losing my joy, whether that was losing my ability to concentrate on other people because I was so consumed with the things that threatened me. I not trusting God, I couldn't focus on anyone else but me. I failed, but God fixed it. He got me through it. Have you experienced his saving presence? These are the moments that he wants us to linger upon. This is the whole point of Sabbath. To take an entire day, he'll have them, to linger upon his salvific work in Egypt. To remember how he saved us in past events so that we'll trust him in future events that need saving. That's the idea. So, is it normal to fail? Yes, it's normal to fail. Abraham failed several times, but Abraham's growth was Mount Moriah growth, because when he got on top of Mount Moriah, he expected the Father to provide another sacrifice, and he did. He provided the ram, and Abraham believed he would. See, there's growth there in Abraham. So we're to have an upward trajectory of growth, even if that's failure-ridden. So have you experienced his saving moments? He wants you to remember those so that you can rely on him from the past to be there in the future. Third question. Is it normal to keep on sinning? And the answer that we've already been to is no. We should find ourselves doing better. Is it normal to keep on sinning as though no testing, discipline has taken place? And the straight answer is no. Joshua and Caleb come from moments like this, and they learned from moments like this. They saw God put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and so they trusted him to do that in the future when everything seemed to be broken and threatened. They send them into the promised land, and I want you, after the 10 spies give their bad report, listen to what Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, listen what they do. They tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, "The land which we pass through to spy out, is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. The next fear you encounter, think of this line of Joshua and Caleb, it's bread for you. It's bread for you. It's the equivalent. It's like a piece of cake. This is a piece of cake. It's easy to eat. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the people of Israel. Joshua and Caleb said, look. We had all these basic elements to life, and we had God. And God has proven enough every time, even when we personally didn't believe that he would. So now we're ready to trust that he'll do it here. Come with us. Come to our side of the line. And everybody said, let's turn on them and kill them and elect a new leader. That's how reliant we are on what we think is good and what we think is right in our eyes versus God's. Listen to this quote by Maxie Dunham. Why does he do this to us? Why does he test us? Listen to her words, just beautiful. He does it for our sakes, that we may know the peace and strength that come from continual dependence on him, the joyful life that is ours when we trust him, and see the truth of our trusting. The happiest people I know are not people who don't have any needs, but people who experience the meeting of their needs by God. Those are the happiest people she knows. This is what we are called to do. It's interesting, is it foolish? I'm just curious, do you look at these passages and say, what dummies? Do you do that? Do you look at this grumbling that's so profound in these passages where God's walking with them and you say, what idiots? How could anybody do that? Is that just kind of like somewhere in your brain? Well, here's what's interesting. I haven't spent a lot of time on this as we've gone through the plagues and into this Companion God series, but I want you to know something that I encounter every week in nearly, I'm saying nearly, but I think it's every commentary that I read on every passage through the plagues and through these wandering moments in Israel's life. Do you know that every commentator, or nearly every commentator, confronts a naturalistic explanation for the plagues and these miraculous deliverances? Minus the Red Sea. That's one where everyone's like, yeah, that just had to be God. But the majority of commentators either propose a naturalistic explanation for the plagues or combat one. Most of them combat the naturalistic explanations and say, this is a miracle of God. Yes, there are similar things that happen maybe like this in Egypt, but this is clearly of God, nothing of this extent, and all these naturalistic explanations. But there are some commentaries that I have that propose natural explanations for what happened. Now, here's my question. If modern day people are looking back on these events and saying, well, they could have happened naturally. Now, they still say God's in it. It's just that God used natural means to do it. If people are saying that now, is it too much to think that people weren't saying that then? Absolutely they were. Listen, I'll just give you an example. This is from one commentary this week. Speaking of the manna. Liquid honeydew excretion of a number of cicadas, plant lice, and scale insects, which speedily solidifies by rapid evaporation. Now, he's disagreeing with it, but he's proposing, he's commenting on someone who does propose this idea. Or there's alternate explanations. A lichen which grows on rocks and produces pea-sized globules which are light enough to be blown by the wind and is known for being sweet. These things actually exist. But it's not like the manna. Now here's where it gets interesting, right? That's the manna. Think manna is solely supernatural in every way, shape, and form. But did you know that quail are common to the Middle East? Did you know that they're migratory? That they fly on these very same routes that we'll see in Exodus 16, and they fly in the spring and the fall. This took place in the spring. Do you know that when they stop, they're extremely tired and easy to catch even by hand? Now, the amount of quail that God's going to send for Israel was likely a supernatural work of God. But these things are actually happening in these places at these times. So here's my point. Just like Israel could look at these events and wonder, is there something, like, just maybe in the passage today, it says there's a cloud with them, but then his glory entered the cloud. Do you notice the difference? There was a cloud and then the glory entered the cloud. So what did this cloud look like when there wasn't glory in it? Well, probably like one of those clouds, right? So there could be, in your worst unbelieving moments, a time where you say, is that really the cloud that God's sending with us? What's my point? My point is we are, in so many ways, no different than them. That if I took you into my office and started asking you of the times that you saw glory in your life that is so personal and intimate that you may not want other people to hear it, and it maybe involves some of your most private and ugly sins, the way God showed up there, he's showing up here. And it's our job to linger on those moments where his glory saved us and to say, I never want to rely on any other lifelines again. I just want to live in the sphere of God's salvific glory and just wait for the next saving event, no matter how dire this dark night of the soul looks. Amen. Last musicians to come.